I just got out of the theaters from seeing Christopher Nolan's brand new film, The Odyssey, on the big screen in IMAX. Okay, in IMAX. And there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this movie, guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the movie review. Let's go. The Odyssey is an action-adventure fantasy film directed by Christopher Nolan, and inside of this film we see Odysseus, king of Ithaca, embarks on a perilous journey to return home after the Trojan War. Crossing the Mediterranean Sea with his fellow soldiers, they soon find themselves battling not only the elements, but an array of deadly obstacles and mythical creatures along the way. Alright, now leading up to the release of this film, we've been covering all the trailers, all the featurettes, all the behind-the-scenes videos to build up the hype for the release of this movie. Okay, Christopher Nolan is one of my favorite directors of all time. In fact, it was with The Dark Knight, when I was below the age of 10, that I truly fell in love with cinema. I remember watching that movie hundreds of times, back to back to back to back. Just as soon as it ended, I would press replay and watch it over again. Okay, and so leading into this, I was very hyped, very excited for the release of this movie. And how did it do? Okay, because there's obviously a lot of controversy out there, which we've spoken about on the channel leading up to the release of this film, and a lot of other stuff that people are talking about. But how was the film itself, right? What was the quality of the film like as a film? Well, it's safe to say this was one of his strongest films to date. So let's go ahead and get into this movie review, starting with my positives for The Odyssey. And for my first positive with this film, we have to discuss the cast, because of course this film is chock full of A-list actors, elite of the elite when it comes to their craft, and you can definitely see that on display here thoroughly throughout this entire film. Now, my favorite character inside this movie was definitely Matt Damon as Odysseus. I know the protagonist of the film is my favorite character, but it was, right? You spend about 80% of the movie with Odysseus, watching his journey to get back home to Ithaca, where his wife and his family and his kingdom is waiting for him, since he's been gone for many, many years, right? And I love the complexity of the Odysseus character. I love how you get to see all of these different sides of him, but at the end of the day, you want him to succeed. You want him to make it back home. You want him to save his kingdom from all the suitors waiting to take his wife and take her hand in marriage, because to their assumption, you know, there is no more king of Ithaca and there needs to be a new person sitting on that throne. So Odysseus, man, I love how it also showcased his ego inside of this film, which, by the way, slight spoilers, okay? I won't get into like major details and really dive into what happens at the very end in the third act, right? But this story is thousands of years old, and for the most part, Christopher Nolan does follow the typical storyline that takes place for Odysseus as it was written in Homer's Odyssey. So back to Odysseus's ego, right? It's fully on display as he leaves the Cyclops cave, and he just has to get one more back in on the Cyclops, and from then on bad things take place, not only for him but for his band of soldiers, and he ends up costing some lives all over his ego, which we'll see is a constant theme throughout this film. Odysseus constantly trying to betray the gods, go his own way, get him and all of his men home, despite constantly being told that there's damn near no way that all of you are going to be able to make it back from this journey. And Matt Damon does such a fantastic job at portraying all of these different sides of Odysseus, at making it feel like he truly is this king of Ithaca. And you feel his aura, you feel his presence throughout this film, especially in the third act, right? They constantly have a bit throughout this movie where he is the only one who can string Odysseus's bow. Obviously, it's his bow. It takes like an immense amount of physical strength to be able to do, and no one else is able to achieve that. And you believe it when you watch this movie. I love this character. There's a lot more to like here. There's a lot more characters I want to address and give a highlight to. So let's move on to Tom Holland as Telemachus. Okay, this is the son of Odysseus, and he plays this coming of age character arc and story in a way, because Tom Holland inside of this film is very boyish. Okay, he's a young man who wants to take the place of his father who's been gone. He wants to take the throne, but it doesn't seem like, at least physically or maybe even mentally, when it comes to like his maturity level, that he is capable of doing so. But man, you want him to succeed inside of this film. You want him to find out what happened to his father, and you want him to get all of these suitors out of his kingdom that are trying to take his mother away, really, and sit on his father's throne and eventually become a king himself. So that coming of age story with Telemachus, with Tom Holland's character, fantastic. I loved it. Okay, it frustrated me when he wouldn't succeed when it came to like combat, but again, that was part of his character arc, and I liked that those elements were inside this movie. Now let's go ahead and talk about other characters inside of this film that were also fantastic, such as Anne Hathaway as Queen Penelope, right? This is the Queen of Ithaca. This is the queen, the other counterpart to Odysseus. She is a huge standout inside of this film. She does a fantastic job at portraying almost like a widow in nature, right? But Odysseus is still alive out there. He's still trying to get back home, but from her point of view, he could potentially be gone and dead. It's been damn near a decade since he's been gone, and you feel that. And again, you want positive things to happen to Penelope because she's held it down the entire time as Queen of Ithaca, while all of these suitors are literally, quite literally, right outside her door. Hundreds of men that want to take her hand in marriage. She holds it down the entire time. She stays completely loyal to Odysseus. What man wouldn't like that in a character, right? So I absolutely love Penelope inside this film. Anne Hathaway did an amazing job with this character. I believed the performance. It felt like everyone around her outside of her son wanted to portray her in a way, and you feel bad for her. You know, she just wants her king to make it back home. Now let's go ahead and touch on some other fantastic actors and actresses that were inside this film and their performance, such as Zendaya as Athena, which wasn't really showcased too much inside of the trailers. They kind of kept her put away and hidden, but in terms of, you know, her presence inside of this film, I loved it. I love the way it was portrayed. I love how, again, she is playing the goddess Athena, and she is just constantly by Odysseus' side, constantly making appearances throughout this movie, being like this soft angel on his shoulder, right? Giving him this guiding presence and guiding force into the right direction to make the right choices, even though Odysseus is definitely a flawed human being himself. And yeah, I love like the mythical nature of it and the way that they did the Athena character. I thought it was fantastic. I like what was done inside of this film. Now let's move on to other characters such as Robert Pattinson. This is my guy right here, okay? Ever since I saw the Batman 2022, and I know he's been killing the game for a very long time before that, for instance, with films like The Lighthouse, right? But ever since I saw the Batman 2022, I've been completely sold on Pattinson. I've loved damn near every single performance he's done, and it's no different inside of this film, but it's a little bit different in a way because he is really like the main antagonist inside of this film. You despise this guy, you're disgusted by him, you hate his character. He's manipulative, he's conniving, and he's also like a complete coward, which is definitely showcased inside this film, and he plays it so well. Okay, by the end of this movie, you just want this guy to be gone and be dead and be done with, and that is exactly what his performance was supposed to bring out of the audience, and he manages to achieve that here. Very strong performance from Pattinson. Okay, now let's transition. Let's talk about some of the quote-unquote controversial casting selections or picks, right? Let's talk about Lupita Nyong'o inside of this movie. How did she do as Helen of Troy? Well, to be honest with you, she's only in the movie for about 5 minutes, definitely less than 10 minutes of screen time, I would say, as Helen of Troy. And man, you know, in terms of what she was given in the script with her very, very small role here, she did a fantastic job. I mean, did we expect anything different? Lupita Nyong'o is an S-class level elite actress, right? So obviously she was going to be amazing inside this movie. And yeah, she did a fantastic job with what she was given. And in terms of like the way the movie takes place and the way they set up revealing her character and, you know, the small scenes that she does have, everything makes sense contextually inside the film when you watch it. So as usual, you know, I talked about it a lot on the channel. I don't want to like sour this movie review with that necessarily, but a lot of the controversies, they were coming from a ridiculous place, I always stated, and no, it doesn't take you out of the movie. It doesn't ruin the film at all once she's revealed and once she does have her part inside of this movie, and it worked perfectly fine in terms of this movie's case and in terms of making sense for the plot and everything like that, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. Go in, watch the movie. You'll have a great time. Trust me, this part of the movie won't bother you whatsoever. At least it shouldn't, unless you have some underlying agendas to push and stuff like that. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is Elliot Page. How were they inside this film? I also think they did an amazing job with what they were given. Now, again, this is another role where they were not given a lot, but with what they were given, they did a fantastic job. In fact, I would say that their scene was even more of a highlight than the Helen of Troy scene, if we want to compare these two characters, right? And there's a specific sequence. I don't want to get into the details of it because I want you to see this film on the big screen. I don't want to ruin the surprise for you, but there's a specific sequence with Elliot Page's character of Sinon, and it is brilliant. Okay, I could not believe what I was witnessing. Okay, now one last character that I want to highlight before we get into other details when it comes to this movie, because we've been on the cast for a very long time now, is Agamemnon, is I believe how you pronounce this character's name. Fantastic character. Again, another character that's not in the movie very much, but when you see him, he just demands a presence on the screen. He's been used for a lot of the marketing material. Okay, I'm talking about the guy in like that just Roman armor uniform. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see exactly what I mean. But man, this is Aura Farmer of Aura Farmer. Okay, he was Aura farming more in this movie than Odysseus himself, and every time he came on screen, like I said, you just felt that presence, you felt the aura. And yeah, seeing Odysseus just bow down to him and do his bidding, and really him make some legitimately questionable decisions inside of this film that ends up biting him in the ass later on inside of this movie. Fantastic character for the role he was given. All right, now moving on from the cast, let's talk set design, because that was another one of my favorite elements with this film. Again, we looked at a lot of the behind the scenes stuff leading up to the release of this movie, so I may have even a little bit more insight into this than other people who haven't seen those videos and who haven't, you know, talked about them, discussed them, etc. Right? So the set design for this film, Nolan went to real on-set locations. Okay, this is not some warehouse, this is not some blue screen, green screen, this is no CGI, no VFX, no none of that. Okay, all real practical effects, all real on-set locations for this film. The entire cast hiking 45 minutes to an hour just to get to exactly where they wanted to film and shoot certain scenes. Fantastic, brilliant stuff. It definitely adds to this film in a major way, especially when they go to locations like the Cyclops Cave, for example, which was a real location that they went to, a real cave. They really drug a huge animatron to that cave to make the Cyclops inside of this film. The sound design, okay, we have to talk about that too. The sound design, extremely crisp. Hearing this in theaters, loud, thunderous, powerful experience. You hear every single sound, and especially, like I was stating, in that Cyclops cave, there's this huge echo effect that they go with, considering they are in a cave. It works perfectly for that particular scene. And yeah, the sound design's off the charts. The score for this film is off the charts. Okay, Nolan behind the scenes, he got in touch with a composer for this movie in terms of the score, and they made sure to remove like instruments and things that weren't necessarily around at that time. And yeah, you feel it here. All right, the score adds to each and every scene. It makes it even more powerful. The score that they used, the background, the soundtrack that they used in the third act for this film, for like the final scenes, that final sequence, oh my goodness, heart-pounding stuff. Fantastic, excellent experience in the theaters. So many strengths that this movie has. Let's go ahead and dive into another one. Let's discuss the Trojan horse. This is obviously like a famous symbol that's been used for thousands of years, right? Thousands of years, the Trojan horse has kind of signified and kind of meant like betrayal or like a conniving nature, something like that. Right, and it's definitely used that way inside of this film, but also Nolan goes a bit further with it. He ties it in a little more to the story and to the overarching theme of this movie, that being that when the Trojan horse is used to enter the city of Troy and take out and sack the city of Troy, which, by the way, that scene, chef's kiss, glorious scene. Okay, the fact that he ties it in realism, right, with all the soldiers being housed inside this Trojan horse and just the experience that they had being trapped in there for days, just waiting for their moment to strike, as grounded as you can get with something so mythological and so over the top when you hear it described to you, right? And then after all of those events take place, just Odysseus recognizing like there's no coming back from this after sacking the city of Troy, the impregnable city of Troy. There's no level of return after this. You've now entered into a completely different era, this era of diplomacy and of exchange in different kingdoms and everything. And the Bronze Age in general is just over. Okay, we've moved over into a next era, and that moment right there, the Trojan War, signifies the end of it. fantastic stuff. Like narratively and story-wise, when it comes to this film, what he managed to achieve with the writing is just brilliant for this movie. Okay, now moving on to other positives with this film, let's talk about the costume design. How was the costume design? I thought it was amazing. I thought everything worked properly for this film. I know people had, some issues with it. Oh, they should have used more armor from the Bronze Era, and maybe that's the legitimate criticism with the film, but it's not personally a problem that I had with it. Okay, I think the armor and the costume design and the set design, all that type of stuff was perfect for this movie in terms of what Nolan was going for. All right, everything looks great, especially Agamemnon's armor. I thought that was definitely the best inside the entire movie. There's also a sequence that they've constantly showed from the trailers, and it's even like the main thing that you see on the poster for this film, where it's like these giants coming out, right, and like this silver like plated armor. Looks fantastic. That scene inside this movie was brilliant, by the way. Now let's transition over a little bit more into like more story details and how did Nolan do with the story of the Odyssey, right? And these famous different mythological events that took place inside that story, because there's a lot of strengths here when it comes to those elements of the movie. So let's dive into it. Okay, I already mentioned the one with like the giants and the armor, and they get trapped in like this forest. It's crazy as hell. Great scene. All right, the Cyclops scene, I touched on it a couple times, but let's talk about it a little more in detail. Brilliant, fantastic scene. Them being trapped in the cave with the Cyclops, them having to work together, put their minds together, and come up with a solution and a plan to get the hell out of this cave, because there's only one way in and one way out of this cave, and the Cyclops controls it all with like this giant rock that he's moving in front of it so nothing can get in and out, because he also has like a flock of sheep in there. Okay, and really they go there looking for food, which was also a constant theme throughout this entire movie. Odysseus on this journey back home with his crewmen, with his soldiers, right, with these other people on his ship. He's trying to get them back home safely without betraying the gods in any sort of way for the most part. And also, they're constantly just trying to find food and water as they make their journey back home, because they're on the sea the entire time. They're constantly running out. So every single time they stop, they're stopping just for food and water, basic needs that humans need. And every time that they try to get food and water, it goes terribly wrong for them. And that's what leads to these sequences where they end up encountering these different mythological events that take place inside of this Greek mythological story of Homer's Odyssey. Okay, now the Cyclops, creepy as hell, disturbing. You get like a real horrific scene. By the way, there was a lot of like horror scenes inside of this movie that Nolan isn't really known for, but he definitely dives into his horror bag for a couple sequences of this film, a couple different scenes and moments. And yeah, it's great. The Cyclops was terrifying. Him just consuming humans right in front of other humans as if they're just food for him. Creepy as hell, scary as hell. You just couldn't wait for them to get the hell out of that cave. Let's talk about the sirens. I thought that was done beautifully too. The way that he portrays the siren rocks and then the siren song, you even get to hear it in the soundtrack. Fantastic stuff. Okay, I love how Odysseus is just going through hell while hearing these sirens, trying his best to hold his mental together, but you just can't do it, and some of his other crew members can't either. Fantastic display for the sirens. There's also this sequence where they visit the witch Circe, right? Again, they seek out her island looking for food, and it is provided for them, but not in the way that they would have expected or that the audience expects at all whatsoever. And you get like some genuinely horrifying sequences with some body horror that was put into here, and I love the way those scenes were done. The character arcs inside of this movie for Odysseus and for his son Telemachus were my favorite parts of the entire movie in terms of when we're diving into the specific characters. And yeah, a lot of positives with this film. I could probably go on for a couple hours. Okay, we could have like a full, I don't know, couple hour long live stream where I'm just ranting off about a bunch of things I loved about this film. There's so much to love about this movie. The pacing inside this movie, by the way, because it is a 3-hour film, I thought the pacing was perfectly fine. It doesn't feel like a 3-hour film. It does feel like a long experience, but not in a bad way whatsoever. I was never bored throughout this entire movie. I was invested the entire way through on the story, on what was taking place, on what was happening. I think there's a lot of replay value when it comes to this movie. There's a lot of reasons to revisit it for sure. I definitely want to see this on the big screen again in IMAX. And with that being said, those would be my positives when it comes to the Odyssey. Now let's go ahead and transition over into my overall review for the Odyssey. Now look guys, overall it's quite a shame that a lot of people's experience with the build-up for this film was ruined with all of this outrage nonsense. Okay, but in terms of the film itself, this is easily one of the best films to release this year, and really of the entire decade. It's one of the best in Christopher Nolan's filmography overall in general. This is a director that's been impressing me for 2 decades now, and it continues very strong. And hopefully, you know, even after this film, I know we're kind of getting greedy. He's given the audience a lot, but in his next film, I'm hoping, you know, he continues with this greatness. But yeah, I love Nolan's adaptation of this classic 1,000-year-old tale. I love how he portrayed all of these characters here, the good, the bad, right? Robert Pattinson was amazing as an antagonist. Penelope held it down throughout this entire movie. Shout out to Anne Hathaway for that performance. Tom Holland does an amazing job with his character arc, this boy to man character arc. Odysseus, this flawed, egotistical man, but honorable soldier in a way, trying to get back home to his family, trying to get back to his kingdom of Ithaca, trying to get his men back home safely, even though he's told every step of the way by different mythological creatures and forces and gods that it's not going to end up the way he wanted it to. Yet he still pushes forward, right? You believe in Odysseus. The third act of this film was so powerful, so strong. I didn't touch on it too much because I want you to experience it in theaters for yourself, but I love the way that this movie was concluded and the way that this movie was ended. Okay, it was a satisfying conclusion. The set design, the costume design, the sound design, the soundtrack, the score, all that stuff was fantastic here, as I expected out of this movie. Just leading up to it, watching all the behind the scenes stuff, that's kind of what I was getting out of this film before even going into it. And yeah, actually getting to see it in IMAX on the big screen, it lived up to the hype for me. Okay, I hate that a lot of people, especially me, had some of the hype for this film ruined for them, but luckily the movie's out now. It's in theaters. We can actually debate the movie itself and not all of the ridiculous stuff that was tied to it. I couldn't be more happy with the outcome of this movie. And with that being said, if I had to drop an official movie review for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, I would give this film a 10 out of 10. It gets the 10 out of 10. I think this is Christopher Nolan's masterpiece. I would put this up there with The Dark Knight, okay? One of my favorite films of all time. This film means a whole lot to me, okay? But now we can add The Odyssey to that level of film. I already know some people are easily going to have this movie over The Dark Knight, right? But personally, The Dark Knight for me, like, I just hold that near and dear to my heart. It's something I've enjoyed for damn near my entire life. So that's a very special movie to me. You know, now let me just showcase the popcorn bucket a little more, because I think Nolan, or whoever came up with the marketing for this film, delivered some of the best popcorn buckets I've ever seen for a movie, especially considering we got some ridiculous ones recently, right? With like the Supergirl popcorn, well, not popcorn, but the cup, right? That cup was ridiculous as hell. But in terms of popcorn bucket, I mean, come on. Not only do you have like the Trojan horse, who knows? You know, if I go see this a second time and they have that Trojan horse still there, people haven't bought it up all the way, I'm gonna have to get that one too. But man, I had to go with the IMAX camera because obviously, all right, we do a movie channel here. I'm a film channel. I love film. It means so much to me. And so this right here is special, especially considering Nolan filmed this entire movie in 70mm IMAX with the IMAX cameras for every single shot. Normally, you know, they'll do it for a scene here and there, particular scenes and sequences that they wanted to do in IMAX for the film. But no, Nolan's built different. He did the entire film in IMAX. And just look at the details on there. Look at the details. Okay, obviously that's where the popcorn goes. I do wish there was like a lid for it if I had to critique the bucket whatsoever. But other than that, like, this is just fantastic stuff here, right? Perfect for like any movie nerd, right? And also, like, if you look inside this particular component, there is a particular shot of the beach, of a scene in the movie where they're on the beach looking at the Trojan horse and they're trying their best to pull it out of the sand. Let me see if I can capture that for you guys. Okay, so look at this. Right, it turns on. I can't really get a good image of it. It sucks. Maybe I'll put, you know, I'll include one on the screen, like B-roll footage on the screen for you guys so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But just know this is the best popcorn bucket any movie fan could have possibly asked for. This is cool as hell. It was 45 USD. Not too bad. I'm not sure how much the Trojan horse was, but seeing that in person, the Trojan horse, it was cool as hell. I definitely was like, damn, I kind of want that one too. But the IMAX camera, I need for sure. And I think this was the last one in the entire theater because the worker was looking for it for quite some time before he found this. Okay, so I'm very happy with it. I seen this online like weeks before the movie released. I knew like I just needed to have it, and so I couldn't be more happy that I actually did get it. And yeah, okay, that was my experience with the Odyssey in IMAX. Didn't see it in 70mm. Maybe I will by the end of its theatrical cycle. Who knows? Probably won't though. I'll probably just go see it in the same IMAX quality that I already watched the film in for a second time. I definitely want to see this for a second time. I'm telling you, the replay value was off the charts. That was my experience with Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. I had a fantastic time as a fan of cinema, of film, of Nolan, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this film down in the comment section down below. If you don't know what we do here on Demigod ENT, we do film, TV, and pop culture based content. So if you're interested in this type of content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.